holy water, words, and talking on eggshells. And that'll make a little more sense, hopefully, in about 20 or 30 minutes from now. We talk about that. Could it be that the power of our words is literally connected to the power of our soul? And what if the one life, the radiant presence, God, whatever we call it, and this transformative force of creation is literally unleashed as we self-express? And the way we most often express is through words. What are the ancient scriptures found in many traditions telling us? We'll look at some of them, but just to give you a couple. From the Old Testament Proverbs, the Hebrew scripture, Proverbs 18, it says, life and death are in the power of the tongue. That's a pretty powerful statement. Proverbs 16 says, gracious words are like honeycomb, sweetness to the soul, and health to the body. Words are like healthy to the body. So could mindfulness of our words bring us into greater self-understanding, self-awareness, and through that, God understanding and how we create? So today, as we delve in, we want to really look at the power of our words. And I want to begin with a story for all ages. Now, one of the things we're also doing this month is we're even lining up even closer. We always have connection between what's going on in the youth program and here. But here I want to share a story with you that I'm calling the story for all ages, because this has also been created for our children. So parents or grandparents, if you brought children today, know that they're hearing the story and having activities around it. So the story for all ages goes like this. In a quaint village nestled between rolling hills and a glistening river, there was a wise old man named Ananda. Now, Ananda was known throughout the village for his profound teachings on mindfulness and the power of words. Every day, villagers would gather under the shade of the banyan tree to listen to Ananda's words of wisdom. He would often share stories that illustrated the importance of being mindful with the words we choose. Well, one day, a young and impulsive villager named Raj approached Ananda with a request. Now, Raj was widely known throughout the village because he had a quick temper and would just say whatever came out, which often, of course, led to conflict and misunderstanding. And so he asked Ananda for a solution to the problem. Ananda smiled warmly and invited Raj to join him on a walk along the riverbank. As they strolled in the gentle breeze, Ananda picked up a handful of pebbles and handed them to Raj. He instructed Raj to throw the pebbles in the river one by one while saying a harsh or a hurtful word or phrase. And so Ananda picked up the pebbles and began throwing them into the river, and he said things like, "You make me so angry. I hate this. I resent you. You disgust me," on and on. With each word, he could feel the energy of words moving through his body, but he also noticed it lingered, a heavy yuck within him. After the last pebble skipped across the water, Anand said, "Now just shake it off and let's pick up some more pebbles. This time, throw something across the river and say words that are kind and loving." And Raj thought a minute and he said, "Peace makes me happy. Forgiveness is healing. Joy, joy, joy. I believe in you." Finally, he said, "I love you," as he tossed the pebbles into the river. As Raj spoke these words, he felt a different energy moving through him, and he noticed a warmth spreading through his chest with a sense of lightness filling him. Ananda asked Raj how he felt. Raj marveled at the stark contrast between the two different exercises. He realized that whatever he projected through the stones also brought something out in him, and it also seemed to linger in him. And so he explained that our words of expressions, like pebbles thrown into the river, do bring something out in us. They carry energy and intention, and they leave ripples. So from that day on, Raj became a dedicated student, learning the art of mindfulness in his speech. He paid attention to his feelings. He learned to be with them so he didn't have to just project them out on anybody and anywhere. He was intentional with the words he chose, noticing what they brought out in him. He practiced pausing before reacting, and he developed greater awareness, which led to greater self-discipline, which led to greater self-mastery. He developed the courage to really listen and to sincerely apologize. He tuned into his inner dialogue, and in so doing, it eventually opened him to where he could hear that still voice inside that he'd never been able to hear before, a higher voice, a higher guidance. He learned that by harnessing the power of his words, he was unleashing the power and presence of his higher self and the greater potential of his soul. Well, over time, his presence really began to change. He became much more radiant. His relationships bloomed and blossomed. He literally became a presence of healing and harmony and inspiration, a beacon of joy in the village. And so the villagers, inspired by Raj's transformation, began to follow his example, embracing the practice of mindfulness of their own speech, fostering an entire community of self-aware people, honest, thoughtful, and responsible, understanding and compassionate, profoundly creative, and deeply connected to one another, each and every one rooted in their own divinity. How many of you would like to live in a community or a village such as that? We already are. That's right. Because the next question is, how many of us know that if it is to be, it's up to we, it's up to me, that it really is up to us to create that and to make that happen? Absolutely. So because I know it's distracting, we hear that squeal, everybody's working on it, but most likely it is something in the house. So just we'll do our best to, anybody, again, if you have a hearing aid, if you want to just try turning that down, we know sometimes it causes weird interference. So the power of our words. Now, it'll be fun to hear the children hear that story, and it's been applied in a way that relates to them so that they can understand at different ages. But it'll be interesting to hear how they then get to practice and live that out. Well, in many creative narratives, not just the Judeo-Christian, but in many creative narratives, the concept of creation and spoken word, vibration, sound go hand in hand. If you take a moment and just look through Genesis, the very act of creation begins when the Creator, what? Speaks and says, "Let there be." That literally creation began when sound, "Let there be." And there's also another very interesting thing linked to that creation story, is that the very first power given to human beings was also the power to speak and to name things. If you look at the story in Genesis chapter 2, verse 19, it says, "Out of the ground the Creator formed every beast of the field, every bird of the air, and brought them to the human, to see what the human would name them. And whatever the human named them, that was their name." That as the story goes, and a story doesn't have to be factual to deliver truth. Amen? So don't let that trip you up. There's a powerful thing here. That the very first thing that humans were given in accordance to this story was the power to speak and to literally establish meaning, establish name through our voice. So the very process of creation and our capacity as a creator, let's assume for this next few minutes that it's closely connected to the spoken word, to what we truly express. It doesn't only show up in the Christian traditions or the Old Testament. If you look from the Buddha said, "A person is born with an axe in his mouth, and he whose speech is unwholesome cuts himself with the axe. Speak only the speech that neither torments self nor does harm to others. That speech is truly well spoken." And then Islam, I love the way Islam says it very succinctly. Islam says, "The messenger of God took hold of his tongue and said, 'Restrain this.'" And Jesus too. Jesus stressed the significance of words and their impact from the Gospel of Matthew, the words that are attributed to Jesus. But I tell you that everyone is accountable for their every word. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. For what comes out of the mouth proceeds out of the heart. Now, I always like when you can see the dance between spirit and science. And a few years ago, a Japanese researcher by the name of Dr. Masaru Emoto, if you'll show that first slide, there's a picture of him in the book I'm going to reference. I actually had the opportunity for meeting him in 2005 or 6. He was in Kansas City while I was there. But this body of research was published in Japan in the late 90s, and it was so remarkable it made its way to the United States, and I believe this was published in 2004. As a scientist, what he began to do is he began to use high-speed photography. He would take water, pure water, and would label a word, if you'll show us the next slide, and then he would take a photograph at the moment it began to change from the form of liquid and begin to take on another form of expression. And if you're familiar with his work, and the book is quite profound, because words such as love, peace, joy, blessing, goodness, angel, created images that looked like beautiful snowflakes. They were symmetrical, they were absolutely beautiful. Likewise, taking the exact same words with the exact same process and using words like you fool, devil, evil, hatred, those words never would come together in a cohesive form. They always remain distorted, not very pretty in their look. He then began to take water from rivers and places that they knew were polluted. So again, water from the same sample. And on one group of water, he would have people pray over it, bless it, send blessings to it. And over the other one, they just left it. And after a time, froze the water. And once again, it was a remarkable difference. Now, why that was so profound is because when babies are born, you want to know how much of them are water? 90%. You today, if you're curious, you're probably between 70 and 50% water, and that depends on our age. As we get older and older, we literally do dry up, I'm afraid to say. Until somebody's able to break through and manifest something higher. But at probably 40-ish years old, 50 maybe, you're still 70% water. That's a lot of water. When this first came out, I shared this message with my congregation in Lawrence, Kansas, and it was wow, and the kids heard it too, and it was wow. And so a parent came to me a few weeks later and said, my child loved that message the other week. And I said, why? She said, now because if I slightly raise my voice, the kid goes, Mom, I'm water, just stop. Bring it down, I'm water. But if science, Dr. Emoto said that when water is a mirror that has the ability to show what we cannot see, it's a blueprint for reality, and it changes with a single imprint. Could that be what the ancients knew, what the mystics knew? I mean, the Proverbs were written, or were put together, compiled 1000 BC? That a long time ago, safe to say. And they're talking about this stuff. Could they have known that the power of word, it does something? And perhaps that's why the writer of 1 John said, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh. What if we said in the beginning was the spoken vibration, the Spirit, and that Spirit was Spirit, that Word was Spirit, was energy, and that it comes now from the unseen and begins to be formed, whether it's through being able to see it in a water crystal or being formed in your consciousness, being formed in the energy of the Spirit, our Spirit, and that we literally then begin to bring it into manifestation. Could that be a bridge? And if so, bringing mindfulness then to the way we communicate is truly a portal for self-transformation, for healing, and for being an instrument, a presence of love and upliftment. So the first thing to know about walking our talk and holy water and words is to just remember that, again, as the scriptures say, there's no such thing as an idle word. Or that's what it says, you're accountable for every word. It's trying to tell us that words aren't empty, that there's a part of you that goes with every word. And when we begin to realize that, these words become much more precious. And how we are in relationship with our old word becomes an opportunity. The second thing is that words can really mirror back to us where there's incongruence between who we say we are, what we want to be, how we want to show up, and what we're actually doing. Have any of you noticed that you may have a tendency to get so caught up in what you are doing that you're not necessarily nice at the time? I had the pleasure on Maui of getting to spend some time with Ram Dass. He lived on Maui and he would come to the Maui church. And I had the opportunity one time of going to his home, and so I just soaked up every moment I could. And he told a story. He said when he was a younger man learning to meditate and he just really wanted to be connected to God. And he was at home and he still lived at home with his mom. And he'd be meditating and trying to connect with God. And his mom would knock on the door and say, honey, I've got some lunch for you. And he'd say, Mom, go away. I'm in the middle of something. So she'd leave the plate, and then honey, you haven't eaten it. Mom! And he said one day it dawned on him, hello, you say you want to be this. Why do you keep doing this? And our words, the energy of our words, help us realize when we're not congruent. A young man named Jacob. Jacob had a hard life growing up, but he worked very hard. Got a scholarship, went to college, became an attorney. He was on a fast track for partnership, doing really well. He was married. They had a beautiful little girl, about 3.5 years old. And he really was working hard. He was also a truth student, wanting to do his best. He said one day he was home, and he got home, and as soon as he got home from work, his little girl Bella was around to say, hey, Daddy, hey, Daddy, hey. He's like, hey, honey, honey. And then he's back doing what he's doing, and he's just trying to get frustrated and looking, focused, and she's down at his feet, and he feels something like tapping on his shoe, and he's like, he's trying to focus, and then he starts feeling his pant leg be pulled. And all of a sudden, he said, Bella, what are you doing down there? And she looked up with her little eyes and said, Daddy, I live down here. Yeah. Ugh. He said it literally changed his life. Because he said, I say I want to be this, but how often am I so caught up in what I'm doing that becomes more important than the energy I'm expressing here? Now, let's just put a disclaimer, and with the story that I shared, what we are not saying is that you never get upset. Because if you're human, you need to. What we're not saying is that if you never get angry, because if you're watching this world, you need some anger to realize these things do not have to be this way. You're going to get angry. You're going to get fired up. You're going to literally probably want to punch some people sometime. Don't ask me how I know that, but just you, that could happen. You're human. The difference is where we land. And those times when you can't help be willing to reflect and go back and say, I am so sorry. I was coming from a place that was, I'm so sorry. Do our part to clean it up. But just to know the things that we need to get out, that are cathartic, that we need to get out, there's a time and a place that we don't need to just unconsciously spew it everywhere. Amen? And so what we're talking about is taking responsibility and knowing how to do that. And our words will help us when we realize we're expressing the one power and the one presence through our words. And that our words are a beautiful mirror between what we're doing and who we are being. So very quickly, how? How do we make it practical? One of the best methods that you will find for making it practical is found in bits and pieces of every tradition, but it's summarized best through the Buddhist teachings. And it's sort of a litmus test, if you will. And what I'm inviting us to do, I'm going to give you 4 things. And for those who are willing, take one on Monday, one on Tuesday, one on Wednesday. You can do the days. I apparently can't at the moment. But take one day a week, and work with it. So the questions we're going to ask ourselves is, when I'm speaking, is it true? Is it kind? Is it helpful? Is it necessary? So, am I speaking truthfully? What if all day Monday you make a commitment that before you speak, as best you can, you pause. Is what I'm speaking truthfully? And when you notice that you may have a tendency to leave things out, or exaggerate or add to it, or totally make something up, don't beat yourself up, but notice that. Be accountable for it, and then begin to ask why. What could I do differently? What part of me is afraid for my words to be truthful? Now, many of us will find that you will speak less words on Monday than you typically do. Because when you're mindful, is it truthful? You're going to really think about it. But it helps bring us into personal integrity. So is what I'm about to say accurate? Am I expressing something as truly as I understand it? And it's important to say things like, own it. This is my understanding. My understanding is this. This. Not they. I understand. So are my words truthful, number 1? Number 2, is it kind? Kind is a word that needs some clarification, because people often think kind and nice mean the same thing, and they don't. Kindness is rooted in compassion, in respect, and in truth. You may have to deliver some hard truths that may not feel like what you call nice, but the Spirit can be kind. Nice is more surface. My mom used to say things to us like, act, there's the key word, act nice. How many of you heard, it's just a saying, act nice. I also grew up hearing that term, bless your heart. Because that's nice. But you were really thinking, you are so stupid. Why did you ask me that? Why did you say that out loud? And so to own it and to differentiate, is it kind? A better word may be, is it true? You could say, is it respectful? Is it really respectful? Is it coming from a place of compassion? And the energy there, if you ever notice that someone in the course of your day, maybe even a stranger, may have a brief encounter and say something in a very kind way to you, and it may shift your energy, shift your whole day, and set you on a whole different trajectory through your whole day. Likewise, you may still be levitating, you're so happy, from your morning meditation. And you encounter someone who is harsh and ugly, and you get in all of that. And it can also pull you right out of it and shift your trajectory where you need to do some work to get back on track. The question for us is, which kind of people do I want to be? What kind of experience do I want to create in my communicating with people? And so, is it true? Is it respectful and kind? Number 3, is it helpful? Is it constructive? Our mom used to also say, if you can't say something good, don't say anything at all. And that's true unless you train yourself to withhold things that are hard to say. So the way I say it is, if you can't say something constructive, don't say something at all. Is it helpful? Is it really going to help the situation? Or am I now venting to people and on people that really, that's something I should not be doing? That it's for me to be in relationship with that, my own self, and not try to make them the matter with me at the moment. So am I speaking truth? Honest? Am I being as respectful and kind? That's Tuesday, to focus on Today, let me come from a place of respect and connection and kindness as best I can. And notice how that is for you. The third day, Wednesday, is working with whatever I'm sharing. Is it coming from a place of being helpful, being constructive, being open? You know, what you don't want to do is come from the opposite, is say something that makes things worse or has no point in it being said. So is it helpful? And then the fourth day, is it necessary? There's a saying that says, unless it can improve upon the silence, must it really be said out loud? To ask yourself, is it necessary? Is what I'm about to say really relevant to the situation? Is it really relevant? Maybe it's an opportunity for me, instead of being defensive and firing back my auto response, maybe the best thing I need to do is to create more space for listening and connection. So is it really necessary? And will it contribute positively to the conversation? Am I uncomfortable with the space of silence? And will I speak up when necessary? Hence comes the Eggshells. There's a really good book by Sam Horn, female author, titled Talking on Eggshells. She begins the beginning of the book talking about something that, through my working with people, men and women, counseling, this comes up a lot. From her story, she said, when I was a little girl, my parents were embroiled in a cold war between the two of them. Dad was emotionally distant, Mom was emotionally wounded. But they didn't yell or fight, quite the opposite. They were honorable people who taught us kids to do the right thing. They just didn't know how to say, what to say, to heal the years of hurt feelings and misconnections. So they didn't say anything. And as you can imagine, that trickle-down approach that my siblings and I tended to shy away from uncomfortable conversations too. And so over time, I realized that I had learned to talk on eggshells. In most of the major relationships in my life, it was exhausting, constantly being on edge with what you're trying to say. Is it right? And worried, is it the wrong thing? That tends to happen a lot. Or it could be the extreme opposite, where your talking is creating eggshells for somebody else, that it can be so harsh and brash without thought. But the question, is it necessary, really calls us to look, to say, okay, is what I'm saying just because I'm nervous and uncomfortable? Is what I'm saying for some other reason? Is it truly necessary and useful? And is it necessary? Do I need to speak up? I've been in meetings or places more than once when I did not want to speak up, but my body tells me, my heart starts pounding, my hands get sweaty. I know when I need to say something, and when I start feeling like that, I don't want to. And yet I've learned that that's mine to do, that I need to be willing to do that and do it in a way that is kind and loving and truthful. And what I've learned is that there's a reason that you're being asked to do that. We look back at people like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. If you know about his story, it was not an easy journey. And yet in 1963, in his speech, I Have a Dream, he inspired a whole generation and catalyzed a whole movement by being willing to stand up and speak. Anne Frank, in her diary, being willing to write, to pour out her heart in the midst of such a challenging time. Her words speak to millions today about the perseverance of the human spirit and as a reminder of the cost of human hatred and intolerance. The young Pakistani woman, Malala, who was herself assaulted by a Taliban because she had been speaking up for young girls and their right to education in her home country. She lived through it, and her words have also sparked a global movement and earned her a Nobel Peace Prize. You never know what your words may lead to. And then I think about the story of the boy that cried wolf. That classic teaching that when we use our words carelessly or dishonestly, it can lead to loss of trust or credibility. And so it underscores, they all underscore the importance that words are not just words. That our words are helping us make manifest. Our words are a demonstration of what we want to create. I'm going to invite our band to come up as they will. So I want to put this all together in a very experiential way. I've shared this once before. Some of you may remember it. But I was the minister on Maui in Hawaii for a few years, and then I went to the Seattle area. And I'd been serving there for about 2 years when the Reverend Sky St. John at the Unity Church in Oahu said he was going on a sabbatical, and he asked if I'd like to take a month off out of rainy Washington and go to Hawaii and serve a sabbatical. I said, let me think about it. Yes. I'll explain to my board later, but yes. So it worked out that I was there to cover a month for him, and I was on Oahu. Diamond Head, Waikiki. If many of you know that area, it's a popular tourist place. People come from all over the world, all nationalities, because there's a beautiful Hawaiian beach, sidewalk, and then shops and restaurants, lots of things going on. So Tia had come in and was joining me for a week, and one night we'd had dinner, and we were out walking this sidewalk in this beautiful setting, and we saw up ahead people on both sides of the sidewalk and lots of people around, and we're like, what's that? And so we walk, and as we got closer, we realized that people were walking through something with young people standing on both sides, some of them holding little signs, but all of them speaking things. And without even knowing what we were doing, as we stepped through, we stepped into what's called a blessing wash. As we stepped in, these teenagers were standing there. And this one would say, wow, you're beautiful. You are here for a purpose. You are so gifted. You just shine. You're radiant. You're so peaceful. They were saying different things like that on both sides. We walked through that, and like a good roller coaster ride, we went right back around and said, let's do that again. Give me this. It was so like, wow, the power of their words. And so I wanted to understand, and so they were sort of rotating in and out, because there was a bunch of them doing this. So I had one of the young guys, a young boy, probably 14-ish, and I said, what is this? And he said, it's a blessing wash. I said, how did it get started? And he named somebody, and again, this is my understanding of what I heard, and let's just say he said, well, Jacob had a class project. He had to come up with some random act of kindness. And so he asked a bunch of us if we would do this one night. And I said, so I got here on that night. He said, oh no, this is our 3rd year. He said, we all did it, and we were blown away. We were high when we left. With saying those positive words, we had never felt better in our life. And people who don't even speak English were doing what you did. They were going through it several times. They didn't know what they were saying, but they were like, yeah, more, give me more. You can feel it. You can literally feel it. And so when he said that, I thought, wow, I want to bring that and have a spiritual community do it. So we're going to create opportunities in October to do things like this and to give us ideas to get out and do these things. So the power of our words. Monday, is it true? Tuesday, is it kind, respectful? Wednesday, is it helpful? And Thursday, is it necessary? So let's anchor this in a moment of meditative prayer. You are the heart, you are the hands, you are the voice of spirit on earth, and all you are and all you do, it's a blessing to the world. I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. Just allow yourself to sit up a little more uprightly. Today we turn our awareness within, and we begin by giving thanks to this vessel that is called a human body. The miracle of this being that we are. We reflect on literally the miracle that we are being breathed. Well, we can't do that on our own. We cooperate, but a life force is breathing us. We marvel at the intricacy of our heart. We don't make it beat. But there's a wisdom and intelligence, a life within us that does, and we call that God. The one life. Not as a being in our image, but as a power of creation that we dare not reduce to any one image. That there is a life force and a being, presence, spirit that is so magnificent. We stand in awe that we are expressions of that life, and yet we are not apart from it. We are very much one of the images of what it would look like. And so we begin to recognize ourselves as our true nature, the radiant spirit. And that this capacity to make sound and to arrange that sound into a word that carries a meaning, that when the sound, the meaning, the word is being carried and conveyed, it is not void, for we have just created what is being sent forth. And we ask ourselves, what can happen in my life if I begin to recognize this capability as a creative, spiritual quality of my expressing the one life? And what would happen if I would sincerely take some time to be with my words, to be with the energy, the intention behind, to be with my self-talk, and to cultivate space to hear that voice from within, and to use my words in prayer, in praise and upliftment of others. So this week we allow ourselves to enter into the questions and to commit to a practice that works for you. Anchoring all of that in the intention to be the light that you already are. You are the heart, you are the hands, you are the voice of spirit on earth, and who you are and all you do, it's a blessing to